Man, one thing I like about Joe Doyle personally is perspective. And perspective in songwriting is always an interesting thing for me because when you're a guy, you typically write songs from the perspective of a guy. And I like one of your, you know, best songs, in my opinion, and we've talked about it already, is the song on Reba's album. And that's from the perspective of a female that's been cheated on, right?
Correct.
So, how do you get into that place where perspective isn't always chiefly important to you as a songwriter? Because this is not just a one and done thing that you did in this Reba song. You do this pretty habitually,
I can't say I could ever speak for a woman. Um,
right? I wouldn't either.
oh, but that song that you mentioned in particular was a true story. And I knew the woman who was being cheated on. I knew the person who was doing the cheating, and I knew um, the woman that he was cheating with. And it was easy for me to get in that headspace. There was a watering hole called Maud's Courtyard, where I met everybody from Harlan Howard to Bob Beckham to Marty Stewart to it was just like the place to go. And so one day we walk in, and I kind of had an inkling that my friend was having an affair with the bartender. She was young, quite attractive young lady, and behind the bar was this big vase filled with a dozen roses. And I knew what was going on. So I was sitting at the front desk. Sharon, who was the office manager, said, "Hey, Opie, will you cover the phones for me?" I said, "Sure." She was a smoker, so she went outside to smoke. And I'm sitting there with my old acoustic guitar, not that one, it was a Yamaha, and the action on that thing was way up here. It was hard to play. And I was sitting there and I playing in the key of C, and I hit a C chord, and then I went to hit the F major chord. And I missed my middle finger. So it voiced an F minor chord.
Hmm.
And I went, ooh. And I think that hitting that chord by mistake, I think was probably the reason that song got recorded. Because
Hmm.
it has, if you ever listen to it again, the very second chord in the chorus is a four minor chord, which is not in the key of C. It's an F major chord. But I know that's off topic about the gender perspective. But oftentimes, lyrically, I think about what will get empathy from a listener, what will get, and I, I don't, women aren't necessarily out buying roses for men, right? So
Hmm.
I knew that because the title was inherently from a woman's perspective. Um, Now, it's funny that you mentioned this because I wrote this with a guy named Rick Peoples, that song,
Hmm.
Buying Her Roses. And he was he had me by about 16 years, and he'd been in Nashville for quite a number of years. So I
Tremendous,
brought,
tremendous songwriter, by the way. Just want to let folks know
yeah,
out
he
there.
was a great guy and
Oh man.
a great person to me to take me in as a 22-year-old kid and start writing with me. But I had a good portion of it. And I said, hey, his nickname was Peeps, Rick Peoples. I said, Peeps, I got this idea, and I played it for him. And he liked it. So we wrote it. And he came up with the lines, I know I should tell him to leave me forever, but what'll I do if he goes? And I caught some flack years later, or in the interim after that was written and released, um, mostly from joking from some of my female relatives, like my niece. She said, "Boy, that's kind of sexist. That what'll I do if he goes?" Kind of thing. But that wasn't my line. And you think about it, this was written in 1990. I know it's only 34 years ago, but I think the whole dynamic between
Things are a bit
women
different now. Yeah.
and men has changed,
Yes, a
right?
little bit. Yes,
Yeah, tremendously from the 1950s, let's
of
say. But
course.
but
Yeah.
even then, in the 1990s, it was the equity of pay was a lot less.
Hmm.
It's still unfair to this day, but it's caught up more than it was in 1990. But
Radio airplay too. Don't get me started, man. Jeez,
Yeah, it's
we need more fare for females in the music industry when it comes to being seen and heard.
country music especially.
Especially, absolutely, I agree.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
but I don't find it very difficult. If you look at to take a different perspective, if you look at novels, I mean, you look at a song like "Mill Worker" by James Taylor. That's from a woman's perspective,
Hmm.
right? If the listeners ever go check out that song, it's called "Mill Worker." It was on Flag, I think, was the album it was from, and I think Emmylou Harris did a wonderful version as well. It was supposed to be for some sort of play or something, so James even sings it as if he's a woman, which is even more interesting
Hmm.
than just writing it from that
I'm not
perspective.
familiar with the song, but I will definitely check it out. You have.
Oh, it's a beautiful song.
I'm
It's
very
called Mill Work.
curious. Do
Yeah.
you find it easier as a songwriter, especially as a lyricist, obviously, to get into the headspace of somebody else rather than writing from your own perspective? Which is easier for you?
Hmm. I would say that most of my writing has not been very personal.
Hmm.
In pictures, I don't have any children.
Right.
I was coming back from visiting my sister who had two little toddlers and had so much fun with them. On the plane home, I was thinking about what a song plugger mine had said to me, where the initial idea came from. But I started to I said to myself, boy, if those two were my kids and I only got to see them like this, boy, that would be kind of painful, right?
Hmm.
And little did I know how many people actually experience that. If I get bored, I go Google, YouTube that song, and people have uploaded so many versions of that song.
Myself included.
Yeah, thanks. And I will scroll through the comments, and some of them are just heartbreaking. But it's amazing how many people have that as a part of their life. And it wasn't something that I personally have experienced. So it was easy for me to get. It's strange. You would think like it would have to be a real personal issue for you to really soak the emotion as a songwriter. But for me, I don't know. I can just immerse myself in it and feel for that person.
I'll tell you, that's a very powerful talent that you have there for sure, because it's so
Well, I
hard.
appreciate it. I don't have much to do with it, so
Yeah, and I hear that a lot from songwriters. It's just being a conduit, and a lot of times it's right place at the right time. You know what I mean? Like just you hear a line or you see something that happens, and just follow the string wherever it goes.
yeah. I do teach some songwriting classes at college level, and I always tell the kids keep your songwriting antenna up at all times.
Absolutely.
If you're watching a movie, if you're watching a TV show, if you're reading a book, if you overhear a conversation, you overhear something someone said. There's so many things that back in the cigarette was from an anti-smoking commercial.
Hmm. And
Um,
inspiration doesn't care if you're listening. It really doesn't.
no, no. What was it? A song called "A Rose from Another Garden," which Dan Seals recorded, was from dialogue from a TV show called "In the Heat of the Night" with Carol O'Connor,
Yep. Great show.
and there was something being said, and I went, "Ooh!" And like I said, back to in pictures, I walk in my plugger's office one day, and he's got this picture of his son on the mantle. And I looked, just making conversation. I said, "Boy, that kid's getting big." And he said, "Yeah, I'm watching him grow in pictures."
Hmm.
And I went, "Ooh," and I didn't say anything. I came back after that trip and wrote the chorus. And I remember sitting at that baby grand piano. I'd written the chorus, and I went, "Ooh, that's a pretty good verse." I didn't know it was the chorus. I thought I had just written a verse.
Hmm.
So once I figured out it was a chorus, I went into the office and I said, "Hey, I hope you don't mind that I wrote this with something you said to me." So I ended up giving him a third of the song, kept two-thirds, but I wrote that one pretty much by myself.
Well,
So
that was very, very kind.
yeah, in retrospect, but I had no idea that it was going to make the kind of money that it made.
Oh, you were early 20s, right? You're just getting started, and
I guess I was in my mid 20s when I
Mid
wrote that.
20s, okay.